Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome back to my channel. I'm always so happy to find you here. If you've not clicked subscribe, you can click it now or anytime while watching this video. As you can see behind me, there's Shannon Daughtery, which I did in honor of her life just a few days ago. And at the time, I wanted to share some of these snippets that I'm having for this video, but I didn't want to take away from her as she rests in peace. And the topic of her having a funeral list, like a do not attend funeral list, and how that could be taken by anyone by that the act of it. And her relationships and how some of her relationships were very bittersweet, meaning people that she loved very deeply, and how they became very disengaged and enraged towards one another. And at the time, I wanted to share this piece, but again, take away from her. So here I am sharing that follow up as to how people can actually come to that feeling of once loving someone so dearly and then absolutely disdaining them. It is probably more common than we realize. And the reason I left her backdrop is because she is the one who promoted this topic. So, in honor of her in that regard. So I would say three things about that. One, it is probably more common than we know. When it is something so deeply like that, in which a person has a strong uh, tied to, committed sincerity to a thing, in which the conversation with you or me or anyone else probably won't budge their thoughts about it. That's typically not shared with everyone. That's shared with an inner circle or not at all. So I would say that anything that you, myself, or anyone else has as a thought is not only us, because we share an ecology of humanity, and that something I could be thinking of, so could you, and I just don't know it, and vice versa. So having said that, it's not as rare as we thought. It's just not verbalized as often. Secondly, how a bittersweet relationship can develop when you first really love that person. In the case of her husbands and her divorces, you had to first really love that person in order to commit the rest of your life to them. And then when that doesn't happen, many times, oftentimes, and more often than not, divorce is very difficult. It really tears the emotions of a person apart. So, what you once loved so deeply, you almost equally hate so deeply. Look at Tyrese, the singer actor, Fast and Furious actor Tyrese, and the turbulence that he's going through in his own divorce, a woman that he felt he loved so deeply. And in some of his talks, he shares that the reason why it's so hard for him is that he had a prayer and a commitment with God that whomever God gave to Tyrese, that he would forever be married. So by having a divorce, and a divorce by which he really wanted to avoid, he felt he was letting down God, the commitment he made to God. Well, you can't control another person if they want to leave you. And this is why marriage and breakups and partnerships and love relationships are so difficult, because if they want to leave, what are you going to do? Block the door? You can't ever leave me. And so Tyrese shares that how hurt he was, that he felt he hurt God. Well, first of all, you don't hurt God. You don't hurt God. He helps you. Okay? So take that burden off of yourself. And so much talk about the rescuing of God. God doesn't need to be rescued, everyone. Please stop with that. God doesn't need to be rescued. He needs to be rightly represented, if at all. God doesn't need any help, really, but he'll send people at the right time or different. So that's a whole different story. I don't even want to get into that, but respectfully allow that person is what I'm saying. And so with Tyrese thinking that he let down God, well, no, but someone needs to get through him and let him understand it. The divorce is maybe his wife let down him. So that's another way. And then thirdly, it could be, and it often is, a person who had an expectation of a friendship or partnership or love relationship with you, and it fell short, or you fell short to them as far as their um, the result they got from you. I put it that way. The outcome, how they felt about you, and how you delivered on that, and they felt by default disappointed that you hadn't lived up to the expectation which they thought you or them, or vice versa, and that's another way. But in this case, many of the on the other side is for Shannon is the working relationships that got so tumultuous between especially Jenny Garth and Alyssa Milano, where they were almost like physically, and one, they did physically fight. Even in the workplace, sometimes you could find a person, I would say, um, just a headache to you, where you want nothing to do with the person at work. You want nothing to do with them. If you had a choice, they wouldn't be working with you. And that level of disquieted dysfunction within ourselves, and that we really prefer not to have anything to do with the person, is still there, because unless you get another job or they get another job, the two of you will cross paths again. And then you have it in family relationships where a sister wants to never talk to her brother, or two cousins who were also like friends are now on opposite sides and they're not talking to one another. Sometimes, if that doesn't over time repair itself, it could lead to such a request where I don't want that person at the funeral, they say. There's a story about a man, and it's my understanding is it's a true story, so it's not a tall tale. It's a story about a man who had a happily married life for 30, 40 years, and his wife died before him. And he became very lonely in the missing of her. They were senior citizens at this time, I believe, maybe late 70s, and he was living alone. And he was not only mourning the loss of his wife, whom he had been married for 30, 40 years, but also learning how to live alone again. The things that she would do for him, the cooking of the dinner, the taking in of the mail, the little things around the house that she would do. And he began to lose himself being alone in this, what he called big home they shared together. So in some of his conversations with his sister, who lived in another state, um, he began to share that. And he began to share that he had some of his own ailments, that he needed to have more doctor visits. And just in conversation, the sister, who was younger, but only by a few years, maybe she was in her early 70s, lived in a senior apartment. And she said, well, and she hadn't visited his home in many, many years. Like I said, they lived in two different states. She said, well, I can always come and live with you and be a helpmate to you, brother. And he said, well, there's plenty of room for you here. I have a he described it as a 3-bedroom house, a big living room. I have a big backyard and a patio, and you can relax back there. I have 2 baths in my home, and I live in a fairly safe neighborhood, he said. And they're having no issues here at my home. There's plenty of room for you, he said. The sister got from that description a house that she had a visual of. I have a big house. So she thought of a mansion. There are 3 bedrooms, so she thought of very spacious. There is plenty of room, so she thought of very spacious. I have a patio. Now she's thinking of not only a patio, but a pool and a big backyard. The homes in my state, the homes in this state were, well, they were very overpriced, but they were like $1 million homes. My home is nearly a quarter of a million or 200, 300, $500,000. My home is, close to $1 million. And so she thought it was a mansion of $1 million. So she packs things up and she travels across state to live with her brother, only to get there and find that the house was a 3 bedroom house, but it was very small, extremely small, almost Jack and Jill children sized bedrooms. The house did have plenty of space for one person living in it. It seemed very small for even two. There was a patio, but on the back of the patio was just a slab of cement and maybe a panel of grass. But it was all full of stuff that they collected over the years. So it was full, barbecue pits and boxes and things. And there was a spacious garage, but the garage was stacked to the top with boxes. So as soon as the sister got in, she began to complain about the house that she thought she was going to and the house that was actually there. And the brother said, I'll change it for you and I'll fix it how you want it. And she began to say, well, this furniture, how long have you had this furniture? And he said, well, my wife and I loved it. We didn't think we needed new furniture. She said, well, all this needs to be brought to current. And look at this, all this stuff. And she began to complain. And initially the brother heard her because he wanted his sister with him. And this lasted for so long, for months even, until the brother began to feel that she unappreciative, that she didn't even appreciate the fact that he was housing her. She didn't have to pay the rent that she was paying in her senior apartment. But more importantly, what hurt the brother so much was the fact that the sister found the furnishings and the home setting that his beloved wife adored, and they adored in their home. And the sister was attacking that. And that did it for the brother. The brother felt that now he was defending his deceased wife. He said, my wife and I loved our home. I never had this. He said, I feel like hostage in my own home. Nothing's right anymore. She's complaining about everything. She thinks things need to be moved around. He goes, oh yeah, maybe I do need to pack some things away, but this has been my home and I've been happy in it. Now here comes this sister with the division. And the division can't be fixed because the deceased person whose memory was there, the husband didn't want to remove. But now the sister is there and she wants it all gone. In the end, they battled so much, the brother invited her back home. I'll pay for you to go back home. I'll pay for my peace to be restored. Now, these are senior citizens. When the sister left, they were so angry with each other, they wouldn't even speak in his house. They would walk past each other. And when she left, they said to each other, don't bother attending my funeral. Now, this is a true story. And how do you repair that when they're both in what I call their sunset years? They were, like I said, he was late 70s, she was early 70s. The brother was mostly hurt because the sister hurt his deceased wife, who in his mind, he had married for 40 years and they loved everything about that home. And she found nothing good about it. So he felt disrespected. This is the point I'm making, in that when we discard something something that someone else cherishes, we really can lose the relationship. It is not, it is not up to you or I to correct the setting of another person's home. It is not up to you or I to change the atmosphere of a place called work. It is not up to you or I to interfere with the decision of another person to love or leave someone. And it is not up to you or I to determine a walk of path for another person. This is where we often cross the line in such a way that's irreparable. So we need to be careful with being like in the sister, making a loving, kind gesture, packing her bags to go and take care of her brother, and then getting there and being completely out of line. He invited you to our home. If there's something you didn't like, he offered you a nice bedroom, a free of rent place to live. Change your bedroom, or maybe add some flowers to a room, or maybe change the furniture around, but never go to someone else's place and knock it down. That was the best that they could do at that time. And maybe your visual imagination of it was different based on what they explained to you. It was just different. And these are things that could really break a relationship, such as the person says just what they said. Don't bother coming to my funeral. And in the same way, at times, we overstep our bounds by impositional involvement, where a person never even asked you for that. They could have been just simply sharing something with you. And there you go. It's hurtful and you just don't know it. So with Shannon, I think that she was boisterous enough to say what's not okay with her, but the delivery of that boisterous way is what divided her, because she was often viewed as demanding and very determined in her tone. And sometimes you don't get through to a person because they hear tonation more than the words that you're saying. So it's not uncommon. And if you have a situation like that, and it's just so burdened, what I call the burden of the broken relationship, that repairing it may not happen, but suffering because of it may. So you learn to move around that to some degree or another and find a place of peace, because every relationship to some degree or another will have some challenges that if we could change them, we would. But if we can't, we won't. And so hopefully, as measured as you can, keep the peace within, at least that part of it. Okay. I love you. I hope you reflect and got something out of this follow up to Shannon's decision to make a funeral list. And anyone who makes such a decision, they have a right to do that as well. And I can respect that. I respect whatever choices you are, as long as it doesn't hurt yourself or anyone else. We can all be good with it. If you got this far, please click like, please click subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Bye, y'all.